Welcome to the What's Our Verdict podcast, where we fashion ourselves cinematic judge and jury. My name is JJ Crowder. I'm here with my co-host Matt Heiner.
Better read than dead.
And Alec Burgess.
Let's get it.
We appreciate your help going the podcast. Go ahead and hit that like, subscribe, and bell notification button so you can keep up with all of our spoiler-free content. Go check out our website, whatsourverdict.com, where you can sign up for our newsletter. You can get exclusive content and updates, and then pick up some merchandise, interact with us, and all those things. As always, the question we ask is if you ever find yourself wondering if you spend the time, money, or both on a movie. To help with that question, each week we put a movie on trial, discuss the facts, pass judgment, and let you know our verdict. Today we're reviewing Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. It was released May 6, 2022. It was written by Michael Waldron. It was directed by Sam Raimi. It stars Benedict Cumberbatch, Elizabeth Olsen, Benedict Wong, Xochitl Gomez, and Rachel McAdams. To restore a world where everything is changing, Strange seeks help from his ally Wong, the Sorcerer Supreme, and the Avengers' most powerful Scarlet Witch, Wanda. But a terrible threat looms over humanity and the entire universe that no longer can be faced by their power alone. Even more surprising, the greatest threat in the universe looks exactly like Doctor Strange. This is our spoiler-free review, where we'll rate this movie on a 3-tiered scale. Worth it, meaning you should watch this movie as soon as possible. Stream it, meaning you should wait until you can watch it for free. Finally, not impressed, meaning you shouldn't watch it at all. You can listen to our deep dive review on Doctor Strange 2 on Monday, May 16th. So we're getting this one out quick, but we wanted to give you some time to watch it before we did our deep dive.
We know you come here first to know exactly if you're going to already just watch this movie anyways, because it's Marvel, right? Like, they don't care what we have to say.
Yeah, but you might know what to expect a little bit better, even though we're not going to spoil anything.
We won't.
But I want to ask you guys, I'm going to make you guys go first because I have an opinion on why I think you guys, at least Matson, may feel the way he does. But I want to hear what you guys think first before I give my opinion. This was an interesting one for me. Alec, I'm gonna make you go first, buddy.
Fuck.
Hey, you are the newest one here, so suck it.
Yeah.
Damn it. This movie was tricky because I felt lost, and coinciding with Moon Knight and feeling lost, and then feeling lost with Doctor Strange. Now I'm just thinking that I'm not a Marvel fan at all, and I only liked the original movies because they were more action-based and less in the lore of the comic book world. So I went into this, and like right off the bat, I was like, oh shit, I am not prepared for this movie. And I know there was stuff going around about like the What If series or some other content that you could view and get prepared. I didn't do that. I just went in raw dogging it, and it took about 15 seconds for me to be like, oh no, this was bad. And so I enjoyed the movie kind of overall, but I was lost for a very large portion. And this was also kind of a very long movie, or it felt that way for me. It got to a point where I was like, oh shit, they're wrapping this up. Okay, here we go. And then it just kind of kept on going for a little bit. And so I was like, okay, well, what's going on now? What else could they possibly fit in this movie? So as I'm talking, I'm trying to decide what I'm gonna give it. I think I'm gonna go stream it. Just because I don't think it was so terrible a movie that you should not see this. And if you know a little bit more about Marvel, you're a little bit more prepared in doing your homework before going to see a Marvel movie, you'll probably like it a lot better. And Sam Raimi, great director. He delivered again. So yeah, I'm going to say stream it.
All right. Matson.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I have similar sentiments to Alec. I think without giving away too much, at least for me, there's a fair bit that is assumed that the audience knows about that would have been, maybe I just don't know enough about Marvel and I need to read the comics or have done my homework as well. But for me, the main villain, who shall not be named, it's just not compelling for me. The character arc just did not hit home for me. And because of that, I found myself finding the other ancillary members, Doctor Strange, America that's with her. It just didn't hit home for me. It felt kind of disconnected, kind of thrown together, and maybe that's indicative of the multiverse. But I didn't find myself endeared to these characters. Like the original Doctor Strange, I really liked his development, where he was going, and it didn't click for me this time around. And um, man, it's there's so much to say more than that, because with Marvel there's so many spoilers. So I'm gonna have to stop before I give too much away. But Sam Raimi's direction as well, while I appreciate the creative nature of what his director styling is, at times I questioned there's just some interesting choices, especially with one particular fight scene that I did not know why we needed to go that direction. It felt like a really big detractor from what was being presented. So I did think he balanced his style with trying to make it a Marvel movie, and it was an interesting twist, bringing some horror elements, which I didn't mind. I think I was fine. I thought it was appropriate for the subject matter. So that's not really. I think that part of the movie was good, but it's the other aspect of just what this movie kind of revolved around from a plot point that I didn't really care for. And to me personally, not really sure how it connects with what they're trying to build moving forward. And I know there's ways that it does, but man, it leaves me trying to figure more of it out than like being much more in my face than I want it to be. Because the other Marvel movies, what I think we all loved is that, especially towards the end, there was a really good buildup on how this gets us to the end, hence Endgame kind of thing. And I worry more about the direction that Marvel's taking with some of these films, and how Spider-Man to the multiverse, all these things. I know there's bits and pieces that fit, but I don't think their story linkage is as good as the first go around. So for me, it's a stream it. I mean, if you love Marvel, you're going to see this. I think you're going to like it to enough of a degree, but I think you'd be hard pressed to say that there's the first kind of inducement of Marvel and these other characters that we liked. This movie isn't up to par.
Fair enough. And that's why I kind of want to listen to you two talk, because this movie, I walked out of the theater torn because I enjoyed it, but my knowledge level of Marvel is deeper than I think the average viewer of Marvel movies, and maybe that's
Common folk, yeah.
Maybe that's a little arrogant of me to say. And I'm no Marvel master. Like there's some of the things that are coming out that even I don't know, but watching this one, I am hard pressed to not know where we're headed. The big, at least either the Endgame style come together, or the initial Avengers style come together, right? Now, I'm not talking about the stupid middle one with the robots and shit that I can't even think of his name, because that movie pissed me off.
They said it in the movie.
Ultron, yeah.
Age of Ultron. I hated that movie.
Yeah, not that one, but either it depends on where they're headed. And what I think the team up movie, the big payoff, I can almost guarantee which one it is based on what this movie did.
But am I going to like it as I did before? I'm starting to question that.
Well, I just
hope I can figure out what's going on by the time we hit the end.
Sure. And I'm sure during the deep dive, I can answer a lot of questions and you'll feel better about kind of where we're headed. But the problem is what we've done and what Marvel has done. And I've been reading some reviews after I saw it, because I saw some really terrible headlines for this movie, and I was reading them going, we're all a bunch of petulant children. It's like I get after Star Wars fans and I go, stop whining about Star Wars. Look, Marvel is just like Star Wars in that it's a great restaurant. Okay. Picture it as a great restaurant. You love to go there. Sometimes the meal isn't as good as you remember or you want it to be, but it's still fucking good. No matter what, it's your favorite, one of your favorite restaurants. You're still going to eat the meal and you're going to enjoy it. And this one is, even for me, one of those. I go in and I'm like, oh, I can't wait to eat my favorite meal at this restaurant. And then I go, that was okay, right? Or I ordered something different and it just wasn't what I expected or what I was actually hoping for. Or I go to my favorite restaurant, I'm like, I'm going to try something new. And it just doesn't work quite as well. Still good, just didn't work quite as well. So for me, that's what this movie was. And it harkens back to, and I think this is the first time we're feeling it hardcore in phase 4 because we had Spider-Man, which was such an epic scale, and it had all these different things where it introduced the multiverse. And before that, you had all these little weird, like you had Black Widow and you had Shang-Chi, so you had new stuff, and then you had an old character that should have had a movie forever ago. So there's that natural connection to what we're used to. This is something new, and it's detached us from everything that we've been used to before, outside of a mention of Thanos in the movie like once. This is no longer anything that we're normal. That's why those like you, Alec, that have no
I
knowledge
can't
of the
even find the
lore,
bloody restaurant. I don't even get
like,
to order. I don't know where the restaurant is.
nobody's given you a menu yet. Like, you're just
No!
trying to figure it
Alex out back in
I'm
the
on Google
dumpster
Maps going,
scrapping.
what the hell?
You're out back in the dumpster scrapping for food like a raccoon.
So I guess here's my best advice for people that haven't seen this movie and you're thinking about, am I going to love it? Look, if you like Marvel, you're going to like it. Are you going to love it? I probably not. And if you haven't seen the WandaVision show, don't go watch this movie until you have, because this is, to me, the movie's biggest misstep. And yet I love it because I've watched all the shows, right? But if you haven't, where Wanda is at and the Scarlet Witch is at in this movie will not make sense to you. And therefore, the motives behind some of the decisions that are made and how this movie plays out on character development will not make sense to you. And in fact, it might offend you a little bit. Hell, I watched WandaVision and I still was like, I don't know if they paid that off well enough. Like, I don't know if they earned that character development that way. I just don't think they did, even watching WandaVision. And they tried real hard. So it just was. But if you haven't seen WandaVision, the first hour of this movie and the majority of the second MacGuffin is not going to make any sense to you
That's
at
good.
all.
No, I never finished WandaVision, so there you go.
Well, and that's, yeah, if you didn't finish it, like, I can't even imagine how you're like, well, how did we get here? Right? Because the cut scene, the final, like the post-credit scene in the last episode of WandaVision leads directly into where she's at when she enters this movie. So it didn't shock me. In fact, I, watching the trailers, had figured out that kind of development piece from where she was going to head. But that it even for me, having seen it and enjoyed one, I've watched WandaVision twice because I enjoyed that show a lot. That it still didn't feel like they earned that story arc to me. So that was a big issue that I had with it. I don't know. It's tough because, again, it's Marvel, so I loved it. And I know where they're headed. And if they do it right, it can be epic. And we'll talk a lot about that in the deep dive, because there's terminology and nomenclature that they use through this movie that hints at what's coming. And, ooh, doggy. It's intense shit if they can pull it off. So I'm excited from that perspective. But again, if you're not a big comic lore, there was so much comic book shit that it's hard to follow. And that's what I walked out going. I'm afraid for anyone that hasn't watched, at very least, WandaVision and read, has any familiarity with like the big crossover comic book stories, this is going to be a movie that you're like, what the fuck am I watching? Because it's barely a Doctor Strange movie.
Yep.
And even like, you have a character that in the comics is extremely powerful in America Chavez, who's a MacGuffin. She's just hardly even in this movie other than a MacGuffin. Like, she's a character. She's a plot MacGuffin. I mean, she's what moves this movie forward. And so it's like, woofty. It's really weird to watch. And while I had a good time, there's a lot left.
That's what I'm worried about, though, JJ, with where Marvel's going is, and I've been trying to think about, well, I mean, we'll talk about this in deep dive too, but how did they get me to, with Infinity War and Endgame, to get to that point and care enough about these characters? Some of them I kind of knew who they were, but even thinking about it, was like, what was Captain America to me before Captain America was Marvel on screen, or what was Iron Man before? Spider-Man was absolutely something.
Sure.
But I don't know what it was that flipped that switch, but they did it, and they did it as good as a movie franchise has ever done. But right now, I definitely have more questions and concerns about, are they going to flip that switch with some of these other characters? Because right now it's just not doing it for me. Where
Sure.
before it did, but I don't know, like what did I can't. I wish I could go back and be like, oh yeah, this is how they built it. I know it's in their DNA, and I'm hopeful it'll get us there. But as of now, like I walked out of that being like in linking internals and as well, same type of thing. When I walked out of that movie, I was just like, yeah, like okay. But I don't know if I felt like that with the earlier Marvel movies. Maybe I did with Age of Ultron. But I don't know. But they figured it out, and they'll probably do it again. But that's how I'm feeling right now.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that back up, Matson, because that was something I was going to say is Marvel right now is getting kind of in their own way, and it's not their fault necessarily, other than the way that they had to start because they didn't have the rights to Spider-Man, they didn't have the rights to the Fantastic Four, they didn't have the rights to the X-Men, which are arguably the three largest and most well-known IPs out there when it comes to Marvel Comics. Spider-Man, X-Men, Fantastic Four. Those are the three tent poles for Marvel, and it almost always has been. You have people that know who Iron Man was, Captain America was there, but they were never the tent pole properties that kept the Marvel Comics side up and running. It was those other three, and they didn't have the rights to them. So they had to start this universe. And what they did was, and I think kind of what you're talking about, Matson, is they started small. Each individual character of the Avengers had their own villain that they were fighting, and it was a self-contained story. And then they naturally found a way to have this larger looming threat in Loki come together. And it just hinted at someone controlling or pulling the strings with Loki. And then they were able to continue to just build all of these individual characters and tie some of them here and there. So they started so small and grew so big. Well, the problem is now we're fresh off of Infinity War, Endgame. And then we have Shang-Chi was extremely popular. It was probably the best of the new movies, in my opinion, still.
Agreed.
Because it went back to what we were used to. It introduced a new character, tied it lightly into the grand scheme of what's going on. And then it allowed for us to be prepared for a larger threat that he could be involved in.
Eternals for me kind of F that up, where they went large and didn't land for me.
Sure, but you got to remember the Eternals is like the equivalent of when they introduced Guardians of the Galaxy into the initial universe.
And I didn't like those movies. That's right, at the beginning.
And what it did is it took those small scale movies and it went, holy shit, we're in the universe, we're out in space, and we got aliens and monsters and Eternals and all sorts of celestial heads floating around and all sorts of crazy shit. And that was what they were doing, is they were testing the waters, going, hey, we're about to go really big here. This is the first introduction to that. And then they continue. Well, now they don't have that luxury. They can introduce a new character, but there's always that what's coming next. And my only fear is that they're not, and they don't have anything left to build small scale. They just don't. Everything else on your old characters like Doctor Strange, even Captain America 4, when that comes out with the new Captain America, it's still too big to go back to the original feeling of that. So I think you're always going to now have, I don't know that you'll ever recreate that magic that they did in the first 10 years, 10, 15, 20 years, whatever it was that took to get to Endgame, because they can't recreate that feeling of who's next, what's coming, except for those of us like me who I watch this and go, oh shit, they're going to go into this storyline. And I go, how the hell are they going to do that? That's exciting. I'm excited to see this character and how these two characters work together. They haven't even introduced some of these characters yet. What the shit? So it's for me, but I get that excitement because I know what's coming ish. Whereas if you don't have that deep lore knowledge of the comics and these characters, you're like, what the hell? So I'm going to say worth it just so I can get it out there. But that comes from my perspective of I love the comics. I can watch this movie and not be lost except in a couple of places. And even then I was just like, oh, well, they're just doing this so that it's not interrupting any of the things and places and people that we know, even people like me know. So I was like, what? But then I caught up. It was so little. But anyway, I can't wait to talk about this in the deep dive because I know it's mostly going to be me explaining everything to you guys.
I'll be taking notes.
And we need it.
Yeah. That's my biggest downfall. It's barely worth it to me, and it's only because it's Marvel. I love Benedict Cumberbatch, and I will say, if you can get past the fluff and the over dramatic shit that's going on in this movie, because it's a pretty action filled movie in that there's something always moving. Like this movie never stops moving in some way, shape, or form. If you can get past all of the holy crap, what's going on, and you just focus on Doctor Strange, to me, his character development from the end of No Way Home, Spider-Man No Way Home, and what he learned from that film, and then taking into account what happened to Endgame and him having to bear the weight of basically sending Tony Stark to his death, like those two things, to me, really change how this movie climaxes, for lack of a better term. Like his character development, if you can get past all the visual shit that you're like, whoa, what the hell? There is some really good character development for him. You just have to pay attention to it, and there's a lot of distractions. So I did like that about it. And I didn't notice that until I got home and I started thinking, and I'm like, oh, that was some pretty good character development for Doctor Strange. You just have to really think about it because there's so much going on that you're like, whoa, and so much that you're not ready for, because the trailer, just so you know, this isn't a spoiler, but it's misleading in a lot of ways, which I get why they did, but a lot of the things you look,
it was mean.
Yeah, there's a lot of things you watch in the trailer and you're like, ooh, you're trying to figure out what's that all about? Why is that happening? And then when you watch it in the movie, you're like, that's not why I thought that was happening.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there it is. Yeah, very weird. Can't wait to deep dive this one because I think there's a lot to talk about, and I am optimistic for what can happen in Marvel, but I worry about those that don't have a deep knowledge outside of the movies, because right now they're laying the groundwork and there's a lot of intro stuff, but they've also made these TV shows very heavy. So I don't know how much of the TV shows you're going to have watched. I mean, at least for this one, again, WandaVision, if you haven't watched it, you're not going to understand at least one of the major storylines at all. So, all right, well, there it is. Spoiler free. Again, May 16th, wherever you listen to podcasts, check out our deep dive review of Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Mattson, tell them where else they can find us.
Yeah, when you want to listen to that, you can find us wherever good podcasts are found: Apple, Spotify, Stitcher. Just search What's Our Verdict. You'll be able to find all our movies there, and especially this review on the 16th. Check us out at What's Our Verdict on social media at Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and whatsourverdict.com. And you can continue to watch Spoiler Freeze here on the YouTube channel. But appreciate you guys listening in. Hit that follow, like, or subscribe button so you can keep getting awesome content from us, and we appreciate you listening.
Yep. Tell us what you thought of the movie in the comments, but leave spoilers out. Don't spoil anything. So at least for another few days, and then we can start spoiling. Because it's out now, so people are seeing it, but technically it came out today, so when we're recording. So keep that in mind. No spoilers in the comments, but we want to hear what you thought if you've seen it already. And as always, we appreciate you tuning in. We'll catch you on the next one.
Bye.
Cinemagic out.
Whoa!